Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we have a special treat for you guys. This is a rarity. This is combat footage leaked by the Russian Ministry of Defense. We've been looking at a lot of Ukrainian combat footage, but what can this footage tell us about how the Russian armed forces fight? Let's get into it, and I will break it down. As you can see, they are insisting that we remind everyone that this is from the Russian Ministry of Defense, which comes to us via Reuters, via The Sun, via Anadolu Agency. Welcome to the internet. Okay, we hit play. What are we looking at? This just is tagged as Russian forces capture village. Now, the title tells us that it's Blagodatnoye. Here's the problem. When you punch it into Google, you actually realize that it's not clear that there is a Blagodatnoye in Ukraine. It tags Google Maps actually tags Russia as the only locations where a village of this name exists. You can see here's my efforts to search for it, but the actual results give you these villages in Russia, and Russia. So looking at the map, where I think this is actually referring to is Blagodatnoye. And why do I say this? First off, it's been a contested village. So you can see this is the map as of the 20th of August, 9 days ago. And you can see that as we advance, you realize the Russians seized part of the village, right? And now have taken the entire village. Also note the exact formation of this village, a series of linear roads connected by a square perimeter. Keep that in mind, and we'll take a look at this combat footage. So you can see here, this is what's called the preparatory fires phase. Yep, make sure we get the most quality out of this. Make a note, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, framed by a square. That's pretty unusual for Ukrainian villages, at least from the maps that I've seen, or at least it's not super common. All right, so what are we looking at right now? First off, what we're seeing is that the Russians are in fact using drones. If you're aware, you may have noticed that in the news several weeks or months ago, the Iranians agreed to sell Russia a number of unmanned aerial vehicles. So it's possible that these are fulfilling that function. It's also possible that Russia has either captured or just commercially purchased unmanned drones. And while they seem to be adopting their use perhaps a bit later than Ukraine, they are realizing that for guiding in indirect fire, they are invaluable. So what we're seeing here looks like indirect fire operations at the early evening or at sunrise, what's called BMNT, before morning nautical twilight, or EENT. These are military terms for the time of day where there is sufficient light to conduct military operations without the aid of night vision devices. You can see this looks like a standard camera used to guide these in, and the Russians are starting what is, I think, a stereotypical Russian way of seizing territory, which is they're starting with their preparatory fires, and they are dropping a lot of artillery onto this village. You can see how much, well, enough to flatten the entirety of this village here. Again, bear in mind, this looks just about right. In fact, I wonder if this here is that lake, or the remnants of that lake that we see to the north of Blagodatnoye. Seems correct. But you can see, again, that Russia has obliterated this village. Literally, you can see the difference. These look like largely intact houses that have taken a number of strikes in the fighting, right? But you can see Russia is dropping real heavy ordnance onto these villages and has flattened them, like completely and utterly flattened these villages. It's honestly pretty shocking to see just what concentrated Russian artillery can do to a village like this. Now you can see, now that they've basically flattened the village, they're using their drones to conduct what's effectively a cleanup operation. They're observing these areas to see if there's anywhere else where Ukrainian forces may be held out. So right now the drone is doing reconnaissance. It observes one individual who, no, that may not be. That may just be a tree trunk or something. They're not moving. right? Oh yeah, this looks like some sort of tree or plant life. But you can see it's carefully looking for any signs that there's still enemy forces operating in the area. And you can see it's getting very close. Now what they're doing is preparing mortars. These look like pretty heavy mortars, probably 120 millimeter mortars getting prepared for firing, right? And there is their mortar teams checking. This looks like it looks like a standard mortar, very similar to what we've seen Ukrainian forces use, may even be the same one. And you can see that they're using the mortar, of course, to guide in more precision fires to dig out any last-minute potential enemy troops. So, dropping these mortars in. Right now, they're splicing in. The Russians seem a little more willing than the Ukrainians. There's definitely been a number of videos where it appears that they've spliced together two separate fights into a single propaganda video, but they always seem to be authentic fights. Some of these parts where they splice in additional sort of scenes of combat, this is actually kind of sick. This is a large, basically I think their equivalent of a 50 cal. I believe it's called a cord. And they are engaging in what looks like suppressive fire, right? They're pointing out that their drones can continue to... Actually, I don't even think this is them observing the enemy. I think this may be the drones providing overwatch to their own troops. Because you can see here's an armored vehicle, and here is 3 Russian troops clearing this house, verifying that there's no remaining enemy. And again, to my friends, the YouTube censors, I've checked this video already. There is nothing that violates YouTube's terms of service here. The Russians have figured it out at long last. 6 months in, they figured out what they can actually put on YouTube, and they have very carefully vetted it. And so actually, I do sort of suspect that the Ukrainian Armed Forces probably withdrew once they realized this village was going to get flattened. There's not really any reason to try to dig into this location. There's nothing of strategic value here. Points out that at one point there were Ukrainian troops here, and you can see finally their light infantry are going in and starting the clearing operation. What I want to point out is that this helmet here is not a standard Russian helmet. This is very, very outdated. Oh, nope, never mind. I'm sorry. It was just a bad angle. Yeah, you can see Russian military, lots of anti-tank weapons. Also, like the Ukrainians, pretty mishmashed in gear at this point. Really funny, not that different from the Ukrainian Armed Forces. One notable difference is that Russians tend to have, or at least Russian paratroopers, will often have these two-part backpacks. They'll have a backpack on their back, and then they will have an accompanying butt pack for storing additional material. So that's a unique difference that... dates way back to the days of Russian paratroopers. So I hope this guy gave us some insight into what I've been talking about for Russian tactics, where you can see by the time Russian troops actually show up to these villages, the clearing has functionally been done by the indirect fire assets, by the artillery, then cleaned up with mortars, and then finally individual troops will move in. And I actually wouldn't be shocked if they encountered minimal to no resistance in this village, given that they just utterly destroyed it. It really is pretty shocking to see Russian tactics in action. Anyway, guys, I hope you got some good insight into this. Of course, if you want my spiciest combat video breakdowns, the kind that I definitely can't put on YouTube, you want to become a Patreon member. You know YouTube has no problem demonetizing or age restricting or just outright deleting videos of some of the realist content, but I always try to give you guys the honest perspective from what I know and my own experiences. Anyway, guys, thanks my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys make this possible. I'll catch you in the next one.